produced in high definition by Fox 50. Viewer discretion is advised.
We took the first report on November 11th, 2001. Didn't know the initial cause of death. Didn't know if it was an isolated incident, an accidental shooting. But within the next month and a half, 2 months, there were 5 additional shootings. We had nearly every deputy over here pursuing every lead. Took it very seriously, still take it very seriously. 2005, we had another shooting. Was quiet again until 2007.
Good evening, I'm Gerald Owens. Welcome to NC Wanted. Tonight's unsolved case takes us to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where since 2001, the small town of Corolla has been plagued by a series of senseless killings. But these aren't the typical victims you would see on NC Wanted. Tonight's episode is narrated by our producer who worked on the case.
Please tell me why. Please tell me why. Why would anybody wanna do this thing they do?
We know from extensive research that has been done on ship's logs that there were horses on Columbus's ship, the Nina, in 1493. We also know from ship logs that the Spaniards began to bring horses to the Outer Banks in the mid-1520s. The Spaniards kept meticulous records of horses. They also wrote extensively of Indian uprisings and illnesses and abandoning their colonies and leaving the livestock behind. Another common practice of the Spaniards was to throw horses overboard if they would run aground to lighten their load. So I suspect some of those horses would have been able to swim to shore as well. These horses are on the critical breed list of the American Livestock Breed Conservancy, and the next step up from that is extinct. They're so unique and so important to preserve. The horses from which they have descended are gone. They don't exist in southern Spain anymore. So this gene pool here on the Outer Banks is all that's left. These aren't just horses. This is heritage. I think any animal that's managed to survive without our intervention for 500 years is certainly worthy of preservation. Until the 1800s, the horses ranged from the Virginia border down to Hatteras. And when Nag's Head was developed as a vacation spot, the horses moved north and south. So you had horses on Ocracoke Island, and then you had the horses that were up here. And until 1985, the road stopped at Duck, North Carolina, and the rest was sand. And between 1985 and 1995, after the road was paved, there were 20 horses killed on the highway. A group of citizens got together in 1989 and formed the Corolla Wild Horse Fund. By the mid-90s, realized that if they were going to be able to save these horses, they had to be moved someplace safer, and they lobbied to get fences put in at the end of the populated area of Corolla. Our mission is to preserve and protect the last remaining herd of colonial Spanish Mustangs. And we also work to preserve and conserve the land where they live. We have 88 horses on 12,000 acres. 80% of that's private land, and the other 20% is split between U.S. Fish and Wildlife, so that's federal land.
The wild horses of Kerala embody the spirit of the Outer Banks. Serenity, beauty, tranquility. For centuries, these majestic creatures have withstood the test of time, surviving on their own without human intervention. But life among the group is disrupted in November of 2001 when tragedy strikes, and 6 of these herd animals become targets of murder.
In 2001, all the horses were basically shot in about a 3-4 block radius. We were able to see the entry and exit wounds that were consistently in the upper portion of the horse, close to the vital organs. If the horse was accidentally shot in the hindquarters, the leg, you could say, hey, maybe that's an accident. It was intentional.
By the time the incidents are reported, many of these horses' bodies have decomposed, and investigators are unable to collect ballistics evidence. They turn to a concerned and outraged community for help. Their assistance generates leads that point to several potential suspects.
We were given information on an individual who was cruel to animals. People had seen him kill other animals, said that he had bragged about killing the horses. We approached him and he has refused an interview in 2001.
On November 28, 2001, authorities receive information about 3 white males who were last seen in a black 1980s model truck with a distinctive silver-colored toolbox. They discover one of the men lives just minutes from the shooting locations. But with little cooperation from the suspects and insufficient evidence, they cannot justify any arrests.
When you're involved with a horse case, there's not really a whole lot of precedence on this that I'm aware of. And basically, we have to make this up as we go along.
Usually when it's a homicide of a person, you get a call fairly quickly. These horses really can't link them somewhere if there's no one we can speak to. It's a lot harder to get information, a whole lot harder to get information on these types of investigations.
With a homicide, obviously you can talk to people. You can say, where was this person the last time? Where was the last place you saw this person? When was the last time you talked to this person?
The crime scene here could change so fast in just a matter of a few hours. From the tide coming in, from the wind, from contamination by onlookers, people reporting, seeing an animal that is deceased, not knowing that a crime has occurred. The perpetrator could have fired the shot from hundreds of yards away in any direction, and then the horse could have traveled hundreds of yards.
Despite the challenges, investigators press on. But after dozens of leads and numerous interviews, the case begins to languish. Years pass.
In 2005, we had another shooting. At the time, we couldn't prove or weren't getting any leads that linked to the same person or anything to the shootings that were in 2001. Because I think you had a fewer number. I don't think it was as widely known as the cases in 2001 because there were so many.
One horse, one shell casing from a bullet, and very few leads. Then, in 2007,
About mid-morning in November, a hunter who was on the estuary legally hunting, he had just finished deer hunting, had walked down from his deer stand and was walking down a power line cut through in this section. And according to his statement, when he walked through, he saw something that looked like, he said, a big black object. I walked over towards it closer, saw the horse, and said that he observed it and it was dead. He walked around and went back to his truck and finally called law enforcement at that time. By the time the first deputy arrived on scene, rigor mortis had not set in on the horse. He was still warm to the touch.
I met the deputy and the hunter who found the horse. He led us to the scene. I walked up to the horse and put my hand on its neck, and it was warm and it was still bleeding. So certainly that was an indicator to me that not much time had passed since the horse had been shot. I could see that the horse had grass clutched in his teeth, so he was peacefully grazing in a clearing when he was shot. We waited a few hours for the homicide detectives to arrive from the Currituck mainland because it's quite a distance, and they cordoned off the scene as a crime scene and did a very thorough examination of not only the horse but the crime scene. The Sheriff's Department brought an all-terrain vehicle, and we had to put ropes around the horse, and it was about a mile, and we had to drag it. And it left a gigantic blood trail that stayed for weeks and weeks. And the backhoe put it in the back of my truck, and then I drove it to Ivor, Virginia, to the Department of Agriculture, where a necropsy was performed. And they had to winch the horse out of the truck with a chain. And I still see that.
At the necropsy, they were able to extract the round from in there and several pieces of the round. The round actually fragmented inside the horse's neck. After collecting that, we sent that off to the State Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab.
They did examine it for ballistics, and were able to give us some information on that, on the type of weapon, type of round that was used.
Results show the slug fragments are from a 12-gauge shotgun. Coincidentally, the exact same model of shotgun the hunter owns that authorities seized during the investigation. Since November of 2001, 7 of the wild horses of Kerala have been shot. Investigators tirelessly work the case, conducting dozens of interviews and identifying several potential suspects. But they lack sufficient evidence to make any arrests. Then in 2007, authorities receive a call from a hunter who discovers another dead horse.
We initially interviewed him at the time, and at some point during it, he refused to answer any further questions, and we kind of hit a roadblock there. And he's still contending that he located the horse.
Despite what appears to be a perfect match, investigators are unable to directly link the fragments found from the horse to the hunter's shotgun.
We have feral pigs in this area. Oftentimes, the fur on the back of a feral pig's neck is very coarse and stands up. Given the amount of the horse that would have been visible behind this from the direction that the round came from, if you were looking at it, the horse would have been bent over like this, reaching down for grass while it was eating. All you would have seen would have been a section maybe about a foot wide or less than that of just black fur sticking up. Given the distance, given the terrain, given what they would have been able to see, it's very, very, very possible it was a accidental shooting.
I find it hard to believe that it was an accident, primarily because the horse was shot at close range, and it was a big horse. We have some horses that are brown, and smaller, so if it was one of those, I might think that someone possibly could have mistaken it for a deer, but an 800-pound stallion in a clearing, I think it's very difficult to mistake that for anything but what it was.
Unlike a long-range rifle, a hunter firing a shotgun must typically stand much closer to his prey to achieve deadly force.
The hunter that you referred to, he has not been excluded, and mostly just some to do with his lack of cooperation. He may be perfectly innocent and had nothing to do with it, but he has not been cleared because he hasn't cooperated, we feel, fully and as much as that he could.
Whether the shooting is accidental or intentional, the hunter's unwillingness to cooperate raises red flags. But when news of the incident spreads, the community provides tips that lead authorities in an entirely different direction.
have recent information that the shootings in 2001 and possibly the shooting in 2007 are connected. That same person's name is turned up by separate sources.
There's always that chance that it is connected. And until we can definitively say yes or no, then we can't really assume anything.
Though the same name surfaces time and time again, not everyone believes this person is responsible for the shootings.
Was it somebody upset with the sheriff's office? Is it somebody upset with the county? Is it somebody upset with the people of Corova? And it's their way of lashing out. We have received information that someone may have done that because they felt the horses were a nuisance.
A newspaper article published amid the 2001 shootings states that as Corolla started developing and the horses were pushed out of their natural habitat, many began grazing on homeowners' property, eating grass off their lawns, and rummaging through their trash cans for food. Ernie Bowden is a member of the Currituck County Commission.
They're not really horses. They're old backyard ponies. That's what they are. I was there in 1967 when the person who owned the first of them turned them loose, and he brought them down there from Virginia Beach. So they're not native to that area. These horses are ponies that you see there today. Nobody wants to believe that, but it's the truth. I don't see any real conflict with them, but I suspect that it will develop. Over time, ponies are becoming far more acclimated to the people. To get away from the flies, they visit under people's houses and stand in the shade where they can get some relief from those flies and the heat and those things. The only conflict I know that has developed has been when those horses would spend maybe a night or day or several hours under one of those large rental houses with all the concrete underneath it. They would leave all their droppings on the concrete, and people have had to take some measure to keep them out from under their houses because they make such a mess.
There are 3,100 platted lots already where the horses are, and we have over 1,300 homes up there. So far, the horses have done very well coexisting with summer visitors and permanent residents, and there's still plenty for them to eat. But I worry about what it's going to look like 10 years from now.
Rumors begin circulating that rapid commercial growth across the island is partially to blame for the deaths. And someone may be deliberately shooting and killing the animals to facilitate more development.
One of our biggest challenges, obviously, is the threat of development. 80% of the land that they roam is privately owned. And of course, landowners have the right to do with their land as they wish. I do worry 10 years out from now, and maybe even 5 years out, are we going to develop them out of existence? The only way we are ever going to be able to keep these horses here is if the land is preserved for them.
I don't believe anybody is intentionally trying to get rid of the horses. No, I don't. I do think that the time will come when, certainly, as I said, in the interest of safety for the general public and safety for the horses themselves, they're going to have to confine a number of them that will be manageable. And as to where they can confine them, my only guess would be on the National Wildlife properties.
The people who are developing the coastal areas need to be mindful of the treasure that exists here.
Though the horses roam on some federal land, they are not federally protected.
The Currituck County Wild Horse Ordinance has a maximum fine of $500 for violating any portion of the ordinance, and that includes getting within 50 feet, trying to touch a horse, shooting a horse. So the penalty is pretty much the same across the board. And my biggest fear, again, because the penalty is so slight, that the shooting on November 17th of 2007 might not be the last one. There's something very romantic about the thought of these horses being able to roam wherever they want.
These horses are a part of Corolla. It's hard to mention Corolla without, in the next sentence or two, mentioning the wild horses.
People who abuse animals rarely stop there, and there are lots of statistics that point to people who are abusive to animals also go on to commit more violent crimes.
You've mentioned a couple of times that one name has been mentioned. I have never heard a name mentioned. I have not. I have no idea who did it or why they did it. If he killed a horse, he killed a person. That's the way I feel about it.
We're definitely getting some fresh leads, and one of the suspects from 2001 we're trying to re-interview again. A lot of things change in 6-7 years. Their family members may give some additional information. Their friends and associates may give some additional information that they didn't want to give then. But relationships change. People who were loyal to somebody back then may not be as loyal now.
Someone out there has information, and someone needs to come forward with that information. We need that missing link. We have a bunch of things that are out there that we can put together, but every little bit of information helps, and the public is probably going to be the key to solving this case.
Really, the community has been a driving force, giving us information. But we just haven't gotten that break that we're looking for, that concrete little piece of evidence that we can make an arrest, that we could take this case to the next level.
I'd feel better even if one of these shootings was solved. Obviously, I'd like them all to be solved, but if we could just solve one, I think it would send a strong message that this will not be tolerated. It won't be forgotten. People won't look the other way just because they were horses.
There's a reward of more than $12,000 for information leading to an arrest and conviction in this case. If you know anything about the killings of the wild horses of Corolla, call us right now toll-free at 1-866-43-WANTED. Or go to ncwanted.com and click Report a Tip. I'm Gerald Owens. Good night.